Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to your Day 10 Great Minds Teacher lesson. It's me, Mrs. Zarrett. I'm just going to fill you in on a couple things. You will be hearing my voice throughout this lesson because I need to make sure that you get to certain things that you might not get to if it's not more specific. So, first things first, some of the materials that you need for today are Thunder Rolling in the Mountains. You'll need your Day 10 Great Minds Teacher in Sync journal. When you open it up, it will look like this. Okay, you'll be answering questions throughout. And just in case, I put links to chapters 2 and 3 here, but you will be listening the way that I'm going to be doing this lesson. And then also, you'll be going back to Schoology after reading chapter 2 to complete this reading check for chapter 2 and 3. So you don't need to open those now. But I will be directing you when you need to go to those. So let's get started.
Hi, fifth graders. Welcome back to Wit and Wisdom in Sync. My name is Miss Foley, and it is great to see you again. Let's continue our journey in Module 1, Cultures in Conflict. You'll need a few materials for this lesson. You'll need your copy of Thunder Rolling in the Mountains. You'll need your handout 15A, Wit and Wisdom in Sync journal, and a pen or pencil.
Again, we'll be using 15A tomorrow, but for today, you do not need your workbook. So you'll just need Thunder Rolling in the Mountains, your Day 9 in Sync journal, and then eventually you'll need those 2 Schoology assessment pages.
If you need any of these materials, please pause the video now to retrieve them. Remember that the title of this module is Cultures in Conflict, and the essential question that we will be investigating over the course of the whole module is how do cultural beliefs and values guide people? In a previous lesson, we watched part of the film called A Landscape of History to find evidence about what the relationship was like between the Nez Perce and the European Americans, and then how it changed as a result of a growing conflict. We've also learned that the cultures of the Nez Perce and the early white settlers were very different. Cultures sometimes come into conflict over an issue when they do not share the same beliefs and values. We'll take a closer look at that in today's lesson. Think back on the film clip that we watched in a previous lesson. Think about how the two cultures, the Nez Perce and the European Americans, viewed the land itself. Now I want you to think about these questions and record your thoughts in your InSync journal. Why was the Nez Perce homeland important to the Nez Perce? Why was this land important to the United States government and to European American settlers moving west? What does this tell you about each group's beliefs and values? For this last question, you might start your response with something like, this showed they believed in or valued. Pause to complete this work now.
Okay, so I don't have you doing this in your InSync journal right now, but I do want you to think about these questions. The Nez Perce's homeland was really important to them, and I want you to think about all that we've learned about the Nez Perce and how they were so deeply tied to their homeland. And then think about the reasons why the European Americans moved west in the first place. Why was the land so important to them? So think about what was going on in California at the time, and remember that miners, ranchers, and new settlers article that we read.
What does a deeper exploration of the characters' words reveal in the novel? From what Sound of Running Feet says to the other Nez Perce girls, we learn how angry she is that the settlers have built a cabin on Nez Perce land. We also learn a lot about her personality. I love how bold she is. She is not even afraid at all to confront this man. And on the other side, I learned from Jason Upright and the way that he responded to her, he thinks he has a right to the land and that the Nez Perce are greedy and they have too much land. So today we're going to listen to a read aloud of Chapter 2, Thunder Rolling in the Mountains, with your classroom teacher. I want you to notice and wonder as you listen and follow along, and pay very close attention to the characters' words, both the characters we've met already and several new characters that you're going to meet today. I think it's going to help you better understand their beliefs and values. I'll meet you back here once you've had a chance to finish reading Chapter 2 with your classroom teacher. Enjoy!
Okay, boys and girls, so I'm going to head out of here and we are going to go to... Nope, let me pause really quickly to get to... Okay, so you have two options here. You can just pause the video now and kind of skip ahead through Chapter 2 and read it on your own, or you can follow along here, or you can listen to this and follow along in your book, which is definitely my suggestion. So here we go.
Thunder Rolling in the Mountains, Chapter 2. At dawn, the wind no longer blew from Hawk's Peak. It blew from all three of the towering peaks down upon our village. No fires burned outside that morning because of the wind. I went through the great lodge and divided the coos roots we had gathered. I told my father about the white people who were living in a cabin on one of the creeks that fed Wallowa River, how they were digging gold. I said nothing about the hole I had shot in the woman's copper pan. They're the first, but more are on the way, he said. He often talked to me, for he had no sons. Unlike other girls in our village, I often talked back. We will stop them. Here we stand, I said. I felt angry when I thought of white people cutting the trees and planting wheat where our horses and cattle roamed. No, daughter. We're few, and they are many. They're locusts, and they'll devour us. Not if we stand and fight. If we fight, they will devour us all the quicker. My father turned his back, which meant that he would not listen to another word. His mind was made up. I do not like this wind, he said. It sounds like many horses running. Joseph, my father, son of old Joseph, was an honored chieftain of the Nimipu. He was their chieftain because he could see far away into the land of the suns and moons that had not yet risen, at the snowflakes before they fell, the small green worm deep in the ruddy apple, the thought before it is spoken. He was a kind, gentle man, for me too kind with the whites. He was not a warrior. On the backs of the running horses are soldiers, he said. Their leader is Howard. The man who has only one arm? I asked. My father nodded. We were standing among some trees on the shore of Wallowa Lake. Waves piled up on the shore. Stout trees thrashed and bent. The mats around the bottom of the lodge flapped like birds ready to fly away. My father stood tall and broad-shouldered. He had black hair that he wore in two long braids tied with ribbons. He used to play games with me, but not anymore. Not since the white men had come to root gold from our hills and streams, and I had stood with those who would fight. Why does the white leader return? I asked. You answered him once. You spoke plain words to him. He returns because he does not believe what I told him. Now you will tell him again? This time he rides with soldiers. But still you will tell him. My father did not answer. His silence made me afraid that at last he would weaken and give in to the soldiers. A single horse ran swiftly toward us. On its back was Tuholhosot, an honored priest of the dreamers and leader of the rovers from the Seven Devils country. He was in Wallowa to speak with my father about the soldiers. "They come," he called. "The one-armed general leads them." "I know," my father said. "I hear their horses." The sun was dying as we stood beside the lake. In the last of its light, a band of soldiers rode out of the woods. They came fast through our village. Out in front rode General Howard, the man who had one arm and wore silver stars on his jacket. He pulled up in front of us, and a soldier came out and stood beside my father to help the two men talk together. "As I rode through your village," the general said, "I looked, but saw not one sign that you plan to heed my order and move your people from Wallowa." My father answered him in a gentle voice. "We have decided not to move to Lapwai, this other place. It is small and far away. It has little grass to feed our many horses." "You have 1,000 horses, Chief Joseph," General Howard said. "You have thousands of horses. You have more horses than you can ever use or sell." My father said, "I have been to Lapwai to look. There are Indians living in Lapwai already. I saw 3 lodges and many teepees." "I will move them," the one-armed general said. "Everyone will be moved, and there will be much room in Lapwai." "That is not good, to drive people from their homes," my father said. A furious gust of wind bore down upon us. The general's beard blew straight out. The two men stood and stared at each other. In a tangle of trees behind them, 3 men, 2 of them in red jackets, were watching. They had ridden up silently. I knew all of them. The redcoats were warriors who had sworn to fight General Howard and his soldiers to the death. Their leader was Waliditz. He hated the whites because his father was murdered by a white man who had never been punished for the crime. Red Moccasin Tops, his cousin, hated the whites for the same reason. They lived for the day they would take revenge. They wore their red jackets as a warning sign to the whites of the revenge that would come. To one side, among the trees, stood a tall young man, his hair piled on top of his head, and a leather band painted with flying birds tied tightly around his forehead. Swan Necklace was cousin to both redcoats, but was there, I knew, only to guard their horses. He didn't hate the soldiers, or the white settlers, or anyone else, not even his own father, who called him an idler and sometimes knocked him down with a sharp cuff on the ear. He would get to his feet again, brush the dirt from his jacket, and smile. The last time his father, Old Two Moons, gave him a thrashing, I was watching. It was 3 suns ago, early in the morning. Swan Necklace had been away all night in the mountains. He went to the mountains to gather baskets of earth, all colors of earth, yellows and reds and blues. He mixed the colors with something that looked like water, but was really a secret of his own, and painted pictures of the sun and moon, of birds and deer and buffalo. He painted the pictures on dresses and jackets, on mats and skins if the owners wanted them. The paint never rubbed off or faded. As soon as Swan Necklace slid off his horse the morning he came back from the mountains, his father grabbed the baskets of earth and scattered them on the ground. "Listen, idler of all the hills and valleys and meadows in this realm of the living," he said. "Listen to me." His son listened and smiled a little, but more to himself than to Two Moons. "Death stalks the land of the wandering waters," his father said. "We are surrounded by soldiers who are here to drive us from our homes or to kill us. Our young warriors, you know them all, many are your relatives, have armed themselves and stand ready to face the soldiers, to die. And here you come riding in from the mountains with dirt to paint pictures." He gave Swan Necklace a shove that sent him sprawling. He stood over him and said, "I gave red moccasin tops and Wallitets the blankets from which they made their red jackets. Now I give them my son to take care of the horses. I have spoken to them. They will accept you as a horse holder. Go now to talk about horses." Swan Necklace got to his feet, but he hung back and did not leave us. His father said, "You have no choice. Go, or I'll banish you from the clan. You will be a wanderer for the rest of your life, no longer a Nimipu." Swan Necklace glanced at me. We had grown up together. I had loved him for a long time, for as many moons as there are stars. I put a hand over my heart and gave him the secret sign of love. Without a word, he went off to talk to the redcoats.
Okay, so now what I want you to do is I want you to head over to Schoology. Yours will look a little different by the time we get to this day, but I want you to click on Chapter 2 Reading Check. You may use Chapter 2 to answer these 4 questions, but you'll click Start New Attempt, and you'll answer the 4 multiple choice questions, and click Review, and then click Finished when you are done. So go ahead and pause the video now to do that.
I had a couple of noticings and wonderings from Chapter 2. I noticed that Sound of Running Feet says about the settlers, "We will stop them. Here we stand." Well, "here we stand" is that sentence that was all by itself on the back cover of the book. And this makes me wonder if standing or taking a stand is going to play a role in this deepening conflict. I also noticed that when Chief Joseph didn't respond to Sound of Running Feet, his silence made her afraid that he would weaken and give in. And that makes me wonder if what is not said is as important as what is said as I learn more about these characters. I do have a feeling that I'm going to have to pay very close attention to the characters to learn more about their relationships. I want you to join me as I summarize, and actually I'd like to have you help me summarize what's happened so far in the novel before we move on. Where does this part of the story take place? I want you to pause the video now and share your ideas with a learning partner or say them out loud.
And you're actually going to head on over to your Day 10 in Sync journal and answer this question there. And when you're ready to continue on, you can press play.
Yes, Chapter 2 begins back in Sound of Running Feet's village in an area called Wallowa. Wallowa Valley was also mentioned in the film that we saw, so you can actually imagine what it looks like right near where her village is or in her village. What new characters do you meet?
You can go ahead and pause the video after Mrs. Foley is done talking here, and you can answer these questions in your InSync journal also.
What did you learn about them? I'd like you to pause the video and take a few minutes and jot down a list of the new characters that you met and what you...
Sorry, this video may have a kind of funky break to it because I ran out of space on my computer, but I fixed the problem. So regardless, you're going to head on over to Schoology in your Day 10 InSync journal and answer these 2 questions. You can pause this video to do that now.
Because they all seem to be involved in this.
Here we go.
So far, we met Chief Joseph, who was a Nez Perce chieftain or leader, and Sound of Running Feet's father. He is respected among his people, but he's not a warrior. We also met Swan Necklace, who's a young Nez Perce man whom Sound of Running Feet loves. He's not a warrior, but he does take care of the warrior's horses as per her father's directions. There seems to be some kind of a conflict between Swan Necklace and his father. A few other characters we met are Tuhulhusote, another Nez Perce leader who comes to speak to Chief Joseph about the soldiers. We also met General Howard. He's the leader of a group of white soldiers who comes to Sound of Running Feet's village. He has met Chief Joseph before. Walit Eats and Red Moccasin Tops are 2 young Nez Perce warriors called Redcoats who have sworn to fight the soldiers. In Chapter 1, some Nez Perce bands, not Sound of Running Feet's band, have sold their lands to the U.S. government. How did the authors develop this conflict in Chapter 2? Why did General Howard and the soldiers come to the village? I'd like you to pause the video and think about these questions.
And you can answer them in your Day 10 InSync journal, and you can press play when you are ready to continue.
You're certainly welcome to go back to the text as needed and share your ideas with a learning partner or say them out loud. In Chapter 2, we learned that General Howard has ordered Chief Joseph to move his people from the homeland in Wallowa to a place called Lapway, where other Nez Perce are already living. General Howard and his soldiers have come to make sure that Chief Joseph obeys his order to move. You're now going to continue reading Chapter 3 with your classroom teacher. We just talked about the many characters that we met in Chapter 2, and now you're going to begin to learn how each of them is involved in this brewing conflict. Pay very close attention to how the events in this chapter develop the conflict even further, and they're going to build towards an outcome that you will want to read about at the end of this chapter. I'll see you soon.
Okay, so let's head on over to Chapter 3, and I'm going to play that for you. And you are more than welcome to do the same as before. You can either listen to this and follow along in your text, or you can just follow along here, or you can fast forward through this video and read on your own.
Thunder Rolling in the Mountains, Chapter 3. The wind swirled high in the treetops. The one-armed general let go of his beard. My father unwrapped the light folds of his blanket. The general said, "Tell me, chief of the Wallowa Nez Perce, one whose intelligence is praised by friends and enemies alike. Tell me, do you believe that I have spoken to you before and speak to you now with 2 tongues?" "With 1 tongue only," my father said, "and I, too, speak with 1 tongue. Believe me when I say that we do not wish to move to Lapwai." "I believe you, Chief Joseph, so you must believe me. I say again to you and to your clan that you must leave Wallowa." My father thought hard. His mouth was closed tight, and his hands were pressed across his chest. He glanced at the snowy peaks, at the blue lake, and at the green meadows fading with the sun. You do not understand that Wallowa is my home, and you do not understand why. The general was not listening. He said something to one of his soldiers who smiled, but my father did not notice. I noticed and held my breath in fear. When I had lived on this earth for 10 snows, my father said, in this beautiful place that surrounds us, I climbed that mountain. He paused and pointed to the mountain with both hands open. High up, where I could look beyond in all directions, I made a bed on a stone. I had no water and no food. I closed my eyes. I put a pebble in my nose and a pebble in each ear to keep me awake. I floated far beyond the sky, far beyond this world. 5 suns I lay there, my stomach on the cold stone, my mouth burning with thirst. I began to wonder how many suns would rise before my guardian spirit came and spoke to me. The general was still not listening. My father went on. He was talking more to himself than to the general. I wondered if my guardian spirit would come, if he would leave me nameless and alone because I was unworthy of being a man. Then, without a sound, out of a quiet night, he came. I could not see him. Whether he was young or old, I cannot say, but clearly I heard him speak a name. I climbed down happy from the snow mountain. Other young men, my friends, had also gone to the sacred place and were given names. We chanted our names until the moon went down and the sun came up. I have many names, but thunder rolling in the mountains is the name that binds me forever to this land of the wandering waters. I am tired of talk, the general said. I have heard enough. You and your people will leave Wallowa before 30 suns come and go. Tuhohosot was walking up and down, staring out from the folds of his blanket. He was a huge man with a fierce eye and a rumbling voice. Who are you to tell us what we must do? He said to the general. You did not make these mountains. The spirit chief made the mountains. He made the streams and meadows, the trees, the grass, the beasts that eat the grass, and the birds that weave it into nests. The spirit chief made everything. Who is this man that will tell us to leave our home, our mother, and go to a place that doesn't belong to us? I am that man, the general said. My father moved between them. I am sure he feared that the hot words would end in a bad fight. Once, when the general first came to Lapwai, he fought with Tuhohosot, put chains on him, and locked him up in the soldiers' jail. I can't move my people to Lapwai now, my father said. The Snake River is flooding. We would need to cross from one shore to the other through torrents of water. Many of my people are women, children, and the old. I have thousands of cattle. Half of them would be swept away. The general pointed a glittering sword at my father. "Listen," he shouted. "I have heard enough excuses. Now I speak my last words. If you have not moved your tribe from this place before 30 suns have risen and set, then I shall send soldiers with guns to drive you out." My father drew his blanket close about him. "I hear your words," he said. "I carry them to our people. In 30 suns, we will be gone. There must be no blood." General Howard nodded his head. He did not smile, but there was a glint of pleasure in his eye. He motioned to a soldier. The soldier blew a trumpet, and the band galloped off. My father watched them cross the meadow, splash through the stream, and swiftly disappear. While he watched them and said nothing, I saw the redcoats scramble out of the bushes. Swan Necklace was waiting with their horses. He got on his own horse, and the 3 of them rode off. I knew where the redcoats were going. Swift as arrows, they would ride to the village and tell all they had heard. They would say that Chief Joseph had given in to the one-armed general. They would say that Tuhohosot had stood up to the general. Every word he had said would be said again. The young warriors would listen to my father, for they loved him, but they would not obey him. They would never leave Wallowa. They would follow Tuhohosot to death if that is where he led them. This was good. The idea of being driven away by soldiers to a strange place far from the home I loved made wild thoughts flash through my mind. I saw myself riding into the soldiers' camp with a torch, setting fire to their tents. I saw myself take aim with my rifle and shoot a soldier from his horse. I saw another soldier running across the meadow, and I shot him too.
Okay, so now what I want you to do is I want you to head on over to Schoology and go to Chapter 3, Reading Check. And you can answer these 3 questions. Okay, they're multiple choice, and when you're done, you hit review and then finish, and then you are done for today. Great job, guys.